All right, well, thank you for joining this video module today. We're going to actually take you through an example that is related to the Understanding Community Level Work video module for the Roma Next Generation video series. So we're going to be talking about the Homelessness Reduction Project. And what we want to just go over briefly first is the key elements of community level work. So this was covered in the video module that does the introduction to this piece of the curriculum. We want to just quickly look at these three elements that we'll be talking about today through this example. And so we want to make sure that community level work has three things: a clearly identified community level need, an expectation of a community change that can be observed, as well as knowledge of how it will be observed and measured, and then also community strategies that include those outside the community action agency, so other people within the community within that collaboration. So this might include your customers, community partners, or others in the low-income community. As we look at step one of these three key elements of community level work, we're really looking at that identification of the need and being able to verify that need through data. And so the example we're using today is the Homelessness Reduction Project. And so this is an example, there's a real example that came from the Learning Community Resource Center. We're highlighting it today because of the relation to the community level work that it has. And so whenever we look at this, here is what they found basically. So they looked at the community needs assessment data, and it points to more than one level of need. So raw data, shows that we have 3,000 homeless people, which is 3% of the total population of the community. And then of those 3,000 homeless individuals, maybe 430 of them are classified as chronically homeless. And then 30 or 1% of them are currently documented as receiving services from multiple agencies within the community. So then we need to ask ourselves, or they ask themselves, what else do we need to know about that raw data statement? We need to look at what are the needs. And so we look at the two different levels of needs here. We look at the individual and family level needs. So some of these would be that the homeless individuals have limited options for shelters, that children in homeless families have difficulty maintaining regular school attendance, or the homeless individuals are unable to secure or maintain work because of the hygiene issues. And so these are really focused on the individual or the family. Then as we look at the community level needs, there is only one emergency shelter, and it is only for men. Then also they found that there are no day facilities for the homeless in the neighborhood. And also, while shelters offer evening meal and some morning snack, there was no soup kitchen meals at lunch. And so these are looking at those two different levels of needs as we're looking at identifying the need here. So as we kind of dig deeper, something we want to highlight is that the lack of support services contributes to chronic homelessness. So individuals report that they can't get back into a home and stay there because of this lack of support services. And so we asked, how do we know this? And this is how we dig deeper. And so what they did is they had a survey among the chronic homeless that showed that they were not using any support services. And while those who had been homeless but now were housed reported using 3 or more support services. So this ends up being a key factor to getting people into a house and being able to stay there. So then we look at the data behind the need. So whenever we look at the data, we can use the October homeless count to tell the homeless number of people in the community. We can also identify how many facilities are currently in existence and the number of beds that are in each. And so this utilization can be described of these facilities, like through the fact that they're restricted to the use of men only. Also, we can establish a baseline related to the number of homeless people that is being served by multiple agencies to know what we're starting with. We can identify barriers to collaboration among the different service providers, including the privacy restrictions on shared information, which is often a huge barrier. So describing the system as it currently is for accessing services from multiple providers. And then we can also establish a baseline of the percent of individuals released from institutions who then became homeless. So how many of them had a pre-release plan that maybe increased their chances of success later. And so that last bullet there, whenever we talk about that, that's going to require some follow-up from the institution themselves. And they will have to be partners in this data gathering stage. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Barbara, and she's going to talk about the components of the need.
So if you've seen the overview, you've heard Tiffany talk about the factors or the elements that influence this need, and they're contributing factors and restrictive factors. And it's important for us to understand those factors as we think about our strategies, because we're going to pick out something that that we have control over, that we can actually do something about. We want to pick out something that's important, something that will actually contribute to the problem. And so for this this example, we have some restrictive factors and contributing factors. So what are things that restrict people from moving forward, moving out of homelessness? It could be a lack of funds, a lack of skills, a lack of support services, or they just can't move forward because they don't have an environment that allows them to have clean clothes. Those are all restrictive factors. Some things that could contribute to them moving out of homelessness are that there are facilities that provide some immediate relief so that they can be encouraged to move forward, and that there are some services to help them do that. That there are day facilities to help support that people getting to work or getting the kids to school. That there's a coordination of support services by multiple providers, and that when people are released from an institution, that they have a release plan that gives them some way out of homelessness. So what are the outcomes? Remember, we said how important it was to identify outcomes, and we're going to talk about outcomes at two levels here. We're going to talk about the individual and family outcomes, and also about the community level outcomes. For the homeless individuals, the outcome would be that they have adequate shelter, adequate emergency shelter, and that the kids are able to maintain regular school attendance, and that people, even if they're homeless, are able to maintain their source of work or their source of income. But at the community level, we want a whole different set of outcomes, that there's a new emergency family shelter, so it's not just for men, and that there are day facilities, and we say there are going to be 3 new day facilities in our neighborhood, which offer both hygiene facilities and lunch. So there's a difference in the nature of those outcomes at those 2 different levels. What will change on the short term? The length of time that a person is homeless contributes to their continuing homelessness. So we want to make sure that people have a plan, individuals have a plan, and that individuals secure services from multiple agencies. And the corollary to those 2 family level outcomes are these: at the community level, that there's a community-wide system, that we've changed the system, and that now human service providers are collaborating among themselves where they weren't before, and that there's an increase in the percent of the homeless people who are actually receiving multiple services. So that's an important piece. And in the long term, a decrease in the number of homeless people, a decrease in the percent of homeless people, and a decrease in the percent of homeless people that are chronically homeless are what we're looking for. So what strategies might we engage? Well, here are a couple of strategies. We could develop memorandums of understanding between the service providers. We could establish outreach to homeless communities, to the homeless people, so that we can help them identify how to access multiple services. We can create cross-training and ongoing support for frontline staff of the various providers so they understand what's meant by this MOU, what the intent is, and how they can facilitate their services to meet the intent. And then how will we measure the indicators? How do we know our strategies are working? So prevention is really hard to gauge. We can't say we're preventing homelessness and we can measure that. We've prevented these people from being homeless. There's not really a way to measure that people didn't become homeless. But what we can do is compare the October homeless count from one year to another to see if the number are increasing or decreasing. The existence of a new facility can easily be documented, as can the collaboration of service providers. We can count how many homeless people are now being served by multiple providers, as opposed to what there were when we started our project. We can actually describe in a narrative the difference in the system of collaboration, and that would be a way to measure the change. And then we could also engage institutional aid in this post-release follow-up. That would take some collaboration directly with institutions, but if we were able to do that, we could identify how many actually had post-release plans. How do you then report that change? On the annual report, we picked out 2 of the possible ways that you could report this project. The decrease in the rate of homelessness in the identified community, that's Community National Performance Indicator 4E, or the 3A, which is about the number of new accessible assets or resources in those day facilities and in the shelter, the temporary shelters. So this is a quick example of how you walk through the need, how you look at the factors, how you identify the outcomes, the strategies, and then the indicators. So I'm going to turn it back to Courtney.
All right. Well, thank you, Barbara, for that example. Very helpful to see how that the community level work elements that we've been talking about can be applied through a real example. And so now that you've worked through or watched the video module for understanding community level work and seen this example that relates to it, you would be ready to engage in the workshop that we have available as well. And so there are facilitator guides associated with those, so that the certified Roma trainer or other facilitator within your agency or state association can pick that up and facilitate it. And so that would be the next step, but those workshops are really adaptable to the needs of the agency. And so all of these materials can be found on the Community Action Partnership website, communityactionpartnership.com. You just go to Tools and Resources, and all of the Roma Next Generation videos, as well as workshops and PowerPoint slides, are within that. So for more information, always feel free to reach out to us with any questions or comments. And so you have contact information here on your screen for both Ansert staff with Barbara Mooney, as well as Community Action Partnership staff. So thank you again for tuning in today, and we hope that this was helpful. Have a great day.